The crystal chandelier shattered before anyone realized it wasn't an accident. A heavy bronze award slammed into the marble floor, scattering glass across the conference hall of the Rowan Group's headquarters. Hundreds of executives, investors, and reporters jerked toward the stage as Eleanor Rowan pointed directly at me. It was him. Her voice cracked with fury. Ethan has been leaking confidential information for years. He's the reason our overseas acquisition collapsed. Every camera turned. Every whisper sharpened into a blade. I stood alone beneath the company logo I had spent 15 years protecting. No one asked for evidence. Not yet. Marcus Rowan, the family patriarch, rose from his seat with slow, deliberate disappointment. His silver hair was immaculate. His expensive suit carried the authority that moved governments and banks alike. Ethan, that single word carried more weight than the accusations. I gave you my trust. I looked at the old man who had once called me his fourth son. I had skipped my mother's funeral because he needed me during a hostile takeover. I had sold the house my father built so Rowan Group could survive its first liquidity crisis. I had spent birthdays, holidays, anniversaries inside boardrooms while his own children disappeared whenever responsibility appeared. Still, I answered quietly. What proof do you have? Silence. Eleanor smiled first. Then Victor Rowan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You really want proof? He asked. He snapped his fingers. The giant screen behind the stage flickered alive. Email records, financial transfers, private messages. Every page carried my name. Every document looked genuine. Gasps echoed through the hall. Even I almost believed them. Marcus closed his eyes. I never imagined you would betray this family. Family. The word almost made me laugh. For 15 years I had accepted being treated like one whenever sacrifice was required. But inheritance meetings? Only blood relatives attended. Celebrations? I managed security while they toasted each other. Profits? Shared among the Rowans. Losses? Placed neatly on my shoulders. I stared at the forged documents. Someone had invested months creating this illusion. Someone inside the family. Someone who knew exactly how our internal systems worked. The chairman spoke again. Hand over your company credentials. I won't. His eyes hardened. So you admit guilt. I admit nothing. Security entered from both sides. Men I had personally hired. Men whose children's education I had quietly funded. None of them met my eyes. One finally whispered, Please don't make this harder, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Hayes. Not Ethan. Titles changed quickly when loyalty became inconvenient. I slowly removed my access card. Then my executive badge. Then the small silver company pin Marcus himself had placed on my lapel years ago. I'll leave. Eleanor folded her arms. Not before signing the resignation agreement. A thick folder landed on the table. Prepared in advance. Of course, this meeting had never been about finding the truth. It had been arranged as an execution. I flipped through the pages. Immediate termination. Loss of retirement benefits. Personal liability for damages. Lifetime confidentiality. No legal challenge. They wanted everything. Victor leaned forward. Sign it. No. His smile disappeared. You think you still have leverage? I closed the folder. I think whoever created those documents made one mistake. The room quieted. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. What mistake? They're too perfect. For the first time since the accusations began, uncertainty crossed several faces. Only for a heartbeat. Victor laughed loudly enough for the audience to follow. Listen to him. Applause broke out among invited shareholders already convinced I was guilty. Marcus sighed. I expected dignity from you. I gave you dignity for 15 years. He looked away. That hurt more than shouting ever could. Security stepped closer. I placed the unsigned agreement back onto the table. I won't defend myself today. Eleanor blinked. What? I won't fight. The room filled with confused murmurs. Victor frowned. You finally accepted defeat? No. I looked at every Rowan sitting on that stage. I'm simply done saving you. Those words landed with a strange heaviness. None of them understood. Not yet. Because every financial shortcut, every regulatory exception, every hidden negotiation, every crisis quietly resolved, had been held together by one person. Me. Without another word, I walked down the aisle. No one stopped me. Behind me, reporters shouted questions. Ethan, did you steal company assets? Did you work with competitors? Will you surrender to investigators? I ignored every microphone. The elevator doors closed. For the first time in 15 years. I breathed. Rain hammered the underground parking garage. My phone vibrated without stopping. News alerts. Social media. Television headlines. Rowan Group executive exposed. Trusted advisor accused of corporate sabotage. The billion-dollar betrayal. Every headline had already reached its verdict. I switched the phone off. A familiar voice echoed across the concrete. I knew they'd do it eventually. I turned. An elderly janitor pushed his cleaning cart toward me. Mr. Chun. Most executives never noticed him. I always did. He had worked in this building longer than almost anyone. They finally chose a scapegoat, he said softly. You heard? I hear everything. He handed me a plain brown envelope. They asked me to throw this away yesterday. I frowned. Why give it to me? Because people only discard things after they've become dangerous. My pulse slowed. Inside the envelope sat shredded printouts. Half-burned meeting schedules, fragments of payment approvals, a visitor log, and one sentence that hadn't been completely destroyed. Emergency legal strategy. Remove Ethan before audit begins. The date. 3 weeks ago. Before today's accusations. This had been planned long before the acquisition failed. I looked up. Mr. Chun had already resumed mopping the floor, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. You didn't see me, he murmured. Then he disappeared into the rain. I gripped the envelope. For the first time all day, I wasn't asking who betrayed me. I was asking why they were so desperate to erase me before an audit. The apartment felt unfamiliar despite being mine. For years it had been little more than a place to shower between flights and emergency meetings. Dust rested on bookshelves that had once held awards. The refrigerator contained bottled water and expired yogurt. A life postponed. I placed the brown envelope on the dining table. Every shredded document told the same story. Someone had begun preparing my removal weeks before today's public accusation. Not because of the failed acquisition, because something else was coming. A knock interrupted my thoughts. 3 slow knocks. Only one person knocked like that. Daniel Brooks, former chief financial officer. Former because Marcus Rowan had forced him into early retirement 2 years earlier after he questioned several unexplained transfers. Daniel entered carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. You look terrible. I've had better mornings. You've also had fewer television crews calling you a traitor. He sat without asking permission. That was Daniel. Blunt enough to ignore manners, loyal enough to never require them. I watched the live stream, he said. They were convincing. They practiced. His eyes drifted toward the envelope. You found something. I slid the fragments across the table. Daniel adjusted his glasses, reading each piece in silence. His expression changed, then changed again. Finally, he leaned back. They're scared. Of what? You. I almost smiled. They just destroyed my career. No. He tapped the visitor log. They destroyed your position. That's different. He pointed to several names. External auditors. Government compliance officers. Forensic accounting consultants. Every visit had occurred after normal business hours. None had been reported to the board. Daniel looked at me carefully. Do you remember Project Atlas? The name settled heavily between us. Rowan Group's largest infrastructure investment. Officially worth $8 billion. Unofficially. I nodded slowly. I remember refusing to approve 3 invoices. And Marcus overruled you. I documented my objections. Daniel's jaw tightened. If Atlas is being audited, those objections become very important. A cold realization crept across my mind. They need someone to blame before investigators reach the documents. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. My phone vibrated again. This time I turned it on. Hundreds of messages flooded the screen. Some cursed me. Some celebrated my downfall. Others demanded explanations. Buried among them was a single unread message from an unknown number. Do not contact the Rowans. They are monitoring every communication. Meet tomorrow. Come alone. Burn this message. No signature. No location. 5 seconds later, another message arrived. An address. Then both messages deleted themselves automatically. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Interesting friends. I don't know who sent it. You do now? I know someone wants something. He finished his coffee and stood. If you go, don't trust anyone. I stopped doing that today. After he left, the apartment returned to silence. I walked toward the window overlooking the city skyline. Rowan Tower dominated everything. A monument built from ambition and secrets. For years I had believed keeping that tower standing meant protecting thousands of employees whose livelihoods depended on it. Whenever Marcus asked me to smooth over disputes, I did. Whenever Eleanor's reckless investments threatened bankruptcy, I found solutions. Whenever Victor bullied suppliers or bribed officials, I quietly repaired the damage before scandals erupted. Not because they deserved saving, because innocent people would suffer if the company collapsed. That belief had chained me. Now the chain had broken. The next morning, the address led to a quiet tea house hidden between aging bookstores. No security, no luxury, just silence. A woman in a gray coat sat alone near the window. She never looked up as I approached. "Mr. Hayes?" "Yes." She slid a business card across the table. There was no company logo, only a name. Olivia Grant, Financial Crimes Division. I remained standing. "You've been investigating Rowan Group for 11 months. And today's accusations? They happened faster than we expected." She finally met my eyes. "You were never our target." I sat slowly. "If you're here to arrest me, we're here because every piece of evidence suddenly points toward you. Which means it's fabricated. Probably. Probably. Not certainly." She opened a slim folder. Inside were photographs of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and encrypted payment trails. Amounts so large they blurred together. This money disappeared through companies authorized with executive signatures. "They aren't mine." "We know." I looked at her sharply. "You know?" "We compared handwriting samples, login timestamps, and travel records." "Then why hasn't anyone stopped them?" "Because we still don't know who ordered everything." Outside, traffic rolled past the tea house. Inside, every heartbeat sounded louder. Olivia folded her hands. "We need someone who understands how the Rowans operate. I don't work for them anymore." "Exactly." I stared at the photographs. 15 years of loyalty, reduced to evidence in a criminal investigation. Olivia spoke quietly. "You have a choice." "What choice?" "You can spend the next several years proving your innocence." She paused. "Or you can simply stop protecting the people who framed you." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then I closed the folder. "I won't help you destroy the company." She studied me carefully. "I don't want thousands of employees paying for the crimes of a few." A faint smile touched her face. "That's exactly why I believed you'd come." She slid one final document toward me. It was a confidential audit schedule. The first full inspection of Project Atlas would begin in 5 days. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "If the original compliance archive is missing before then, every crime disappears forever." Someone inside Rowan Group was already moving. And for the first time, I had no intention of stopping them. The rain had stopped by the time I left the tea house, but the city still looked washed in gray. 5 days. That was all the Financial Crimes Division had before the Project Atlas archive either reached investigators or vanished forever. 5 days. 15 years ago, I would already have been inside Rowan Tower, reorganizing legal teams, calling department heads, and quietly preventing another disaster before anyone outside the executive floor noticed. Today, my phone stayed in my pocket. I walked away. At exactly 8:15 the next morning, my apartment buzzer rang continuously. Not once. Not twice. Someone kept pressing it. When I opened the building entrance remotely, hurried footsteps thundered upstairs. The door burst open. Grace, the youngest Rowan. Unlike Eleanor and Victor, Grace had never chased power. She usually avoided board meetings, charity galas, and shareholder politics. Today, she looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her eyes. "Ethan." She stopped after seeing my expression. "I came to explain." "No. I didn't know they were going to accuse you." "I believe you." She blinked. "You do?" "I believe you weren't invited." The relief on her face disappeared almost immediately. "You think I'm weak." "I think they stopped trusting everyone." She lowered her eyes. "They're tearing each other apart." I said nothing. Grace stepped farther inside. "The overseas banks froze 2 credit lines this morning." Silence. "The media found another anonymous source." Silence. 3 senior executives resigned overnight." Still silence. Finally, she asked the question she had really come to ask. "What should we do?" For years, I had always answered. "Call this lawyer. Replace that director. Delay the announcement. Negotiate privately. Protect the company first." This time, I poured myself another cup of coffee. Nothing more. Grace stared. "Ethan, you'll figure it out." Her breathing became uneven. "You've never said that before." "No. You always fix everything." "I used to." She took one step closer. "I know everyone treated you unfairly." "Unfairly." I laughed quietly. Grace, your brother once blamed me because he lost a private yacht during a gambling trip. She looked embarrassed. Your sister announced company layoffs during my father's funeral because she couldn't postpone a board meeting. Her lips trembled. I know. Marcus asked me to mortgage my own home to cover the company's debt, while Victor bought another mansion. She couldn't answer. None of those stories were new. She had simply never heard them spoken aloud. I stayed because innocent employees depended on Rowan Group. I looked directly into her eyes. I never stayed because your family deserved me. Grace wiped away tears. So this is goodbye? I don't know. She nodded slowly. Before leaving, she whispered, they're afraid. Of prison? No. She looked toward the skyline where Rowan Tower rose above every other building. They're afraid because they don't know how anything actually works without you. 3 hours later, my phone exploded with notifications. Rowan Group shares fall 11%. Global partner suspends negotiations. Internal executive conflict reported. I closed every article without reading. Then another call arrived. Victor. I rejected it. He called again. Rejected. Again. Rejected. The fourth time I answered. What? You've made your point. My point. Come back. I almost smiled. You fired me yesterday. You forced our hand. I signed nothing. His voice sharpened. The board will reinstate you. No. We'll double your compensation. No. You can become vice chairman. No. He finally shouted. What do you want? Peace. Respect. The ability to sleep without waiting for another midnight crisis. None of those things could be bought. I want nothing from the Rowans. The line went silent. Then, if you refuse. Victor inhaled sharply. Don't blame us for what happens next. The call ended. Threat, desperation, or both. That evening, Olivia Grant met me again, this time inside an underground parking garage. She handed me a sealed envelope. Someone accessed the compliance archive. When? 40 minutes ago. Was anything taken? We don't know. She hesitated. Our surveillance team lost visual contact for exactly 3 minutes. Professional investigators. Losing surveillance. That wasn't coincidence. Someone powerful had intervened. She studied my face. You aren't surprised. I've worked with the Rowans. She nodded slowly. Then tell me something. What? If you wanted to erase 15 years of financial evidence. I answered before she finished. You wouldn't destroy the archive. She frowned. You'd replace it. Olivia's expression froze. Because she knew. A fake archive would survive audits far better than missing files. And only someone who truly understood Rowan Group would think that way. Someone inside. Someone still trusted. The elevator opened onto the top floor of an old commercial building overlooking the financial district. Daniel Brooks was already waiting. He hadn't asked why I wanted to meet somewhere anonymous. He understood. Old habits from years of crisis management. He placed a laptop between us. I've been watching. The company? The family. He pressed enter. A network diagram filled the screen. Dozens of shell companies. Private trusts. Investment funds. Lines connected everything like a spider's web. Only one name appeared repeatedly. Lucas Harlan. I frowned. The external legal advisor? Daniel nodded. Officially. Unofficially. The man who convinced Marcus to approve Project Atlas. I remembered Lucas well. Always smiling. Always calm. Always speaking just enough to sound trustworthy. Never enough to become responsible. Daniel zoomed in. For 3 years, every questionable transaction passed through firms connected to him. So why wasn't he exposed? Because every approval carried executive signatures. Mine included. Forged. Carefully timed. Buried beneath thousands of legitimate documents. I leaned back. So Lucas needed someone inside. Exactly. Before either of us spoke again, Daniel's phone vibrated. His face changed after reading one message. What happened? The board called an emergency meeting. That's normal. They fired Eleanor. I stared. What? They're blaming her for everything. I understood immediately. The family had begun sacrificing its own. Exactly as they had sacrificed me. Daniel sighed. It starts. News spread through the city within an hour. Rowan Group removes coup Eleanor Rowan. Anonymous insiders claimed she had approved unauthorized payments. Others insisted Victor was behind the leaks. Financial commentators openly questioned whether Marcus Rowan still controlled the company. The empire no longer looked untouchable. It looked hungry. Hungry enough to consume itself. Late that night, another visitor arrived. Marcus Rowan. Alone. No security. No assistance. No expensive convoy. He looked older than he had 48 hours earlier. The lines around his eyes had deepened. I came because this cannot continue. I remained standing. This ended when you chose not to hear me. He glanced around the apartment. You still live here. I sold the better house to save your company. His shoulders sank almost imperceptibly. I remember. No. I shook my head. You remember the money. Silence. He took a slow breath. I made mistakes. You made choices. Ethan, I buried regulatory violations because you promised they'd be corrected. He lowered his gaze. I negotiated with angry unions while Victor vacationed in Europe. No answer. I protected Eleanor from shareholders after every reckless acquisition. His hands tightened around his cane. I accepted public criticism because you said family must stand together. The word family lingered between us. Broken. Marcus finally looked at me. I cannot undo those years. No. But help me one last time. There it was. Not an apology. A request. Always another request. What happens if I refuse? His voice became almost inaudible. The company may not survive. For years those words would have broken me. Now, I walked to the window. Thousands of office lights glittered across the city. Some belonged to Rowan Group employees. Many belonged to competitors. Life continued. Companies rose. Companies fell. People adapted. The world did not end because one empire cracked. Without turning around, I answered. I won't save people who are still hiding the truth. Marcus stood silently. I don't know everything. I know. That surprised him. You aren't the one pulling every string anymore. His eyes widened. You figured that out. I figured it out yesterday. Another long silence settled. Then Marcus spoke the first completely honest sentence I had heard from him in years. I'm afraid. Not of bankruptcy. Not of prison. Of losing control. I finally faced him. Then stopped controlling everything. He looked at me as if I had spoken another language. Because perhaps I had. Men like Marcus built empires. They rarely learned how to let truth exist without managing it. He left without another word. As the apartment door closed, my phone vibrated. Olivia Grant. I answered immediately. We found the original archive. Relief lasted less than a second. Her next sentence erased it. But someone broke into evidence storage. My grip tightened. Did they steal it? No. She paused. They murdered the officer guarding it. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. Someone was no longer protecting secrets. Someone was willing to kill for them. And that changed everything. The crime scene smelled of bleach, wet concrete, and burnt coffee. Detectives moved in silence. No shouting. No dramatic orders. Only the quiet efficiency that followed a murder. The evidence storage room was smaller than I expected. Metal shelves lined 3 walls. Every cabinet had been opened. Nothing appeared disturbed. That was the unsettling part. Olivia Grant stood beside the doorway, her gray coat replaced by a navy windbreaker bearing the insignia of the Financial Crimes Division. The killer knew exactly where to go. She didn't look at me when she spoke. He ignored everything else. A white sheet covered the fallen evidence officer. Only one hand remained visible, still gripping a storage key. I swallowed hard. He died protecting evidence. Olivia nodded. He refused to surrender the archive. A young forensic technician approached. We found no fingerprints. No cameras. I asked. They failed. Failed? The technician hesitated. They were disabled remotely, 3 minutes before the break-in. 3 minutes. Again. The same mysterious window. The same impossible precision. Someone wasn't merely wealthy. Someone had access to security infrastructure. Olivia handed me a tablet. Look at the access log. I scanned the entries. Authorized entry. Evidence retrieval. Internal override. Then, one unfamiliar authorization code. Not belonging to any investigator. Not belonging to the police. Just 6 letters. Orion. I've never seen this. Olivia watched me carefully. Neither have we. I looked again. The override hadn't erased records. It had replaced them. Exactly as I predicted someone would replace the compliance archive. The pattern repeated. Replace. Don't remove. Alter reality without leaving obvious emptiness. I finally looked up. This isn't how the Rowans operate. Olivia frowned. What do you mean? They hide scandals. They don't kill people. They silence reputations. I pointed toward the covered body. This is escalation. She folded her arms. So someone else entered the game. Someone who believes exposure is more dangerous than murder. The room fell silent. Even the nearby detectives slowed their movements after hearing those words. When I stepped outside, reporters surged toward the police barricades. Microphones stretched forward. Could this murder be connected to Rowan Group? Mr. Hayes, are you still a suspect? Did you know the victim? I ignored every question. Across the street, a black sedan waited with tinted windows. Its engine idled. Nothing unusual, except it had been parked there before I entered, and it remained after everyone else had left. The driver's window lowered slightly. A folded piece of paper slipped onto the pavement. Then the sedan drove away. No license plate. No hesitation. Just gone. I unfolded the note. 3 words. Trust Daniel. Carefully. No signature. No explanation. I stared at the handwriting. Different from the anonymous messages I'd received before. Someone wanted me suspicious. But of whom? Daniel? Or the warning itself? That evening, Daniel arrived carrying 2 thick storage boxes. I emptied my office. You still had one? They finally remembered to revoke my building access. He laughed softly. I didn't. He noticed immediately. What's wrong? I placed the anonymous note on the table. His face remained unreadable. So now someone wants us doubting each other. You think it's fake. I think it's convenient. He sat heavily. Ethan, if someone wanted to isolate you, they'd make me distrust the only people helping. He nodded. Exactly. I wanted to believe him. I did. But trust had become expensive. Daniel opened one of the boxes. Old accounting ledgers. Meeting minutes. Archived board resolutions. Paper. Actual paper. Digital records disappear. He smiled faintly. Executives forget old accountants never throw anything away. For the next 2 hours, we sorted documents. One invoice. Another contract. Minutes from emergency board meetings. Then Daniel stopped. What? He slowly pulled out a faded envelope. The seal bore Rowan Group's emblem. Unopened. The date froze me. 6 years earlier. The night Project Atlas had been approved. It was misfiled. He carefully broke the seal. Inside lay a handwritten memorandum. Not typed. Handwritten. Marcus Rowan's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Daniel read aloud. If Atlas fails, responsibility cannot remain within the family. The room grew colder. Another line. Ethan must never discover the complete financing structure. I closed my eyes. Marcus knew. Not every crime. But enough. Enough to hide the truth from me. Enough to protect blood over loyalty. Daniel whispered. I'm sorry. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Only tired. Very tired. The next morning, Rowan Tower no longer looked invincible. Half the executive parking spaces were empty. News helicopters circled overhead. Employees entered quietly, avoiding cameras. No one laughed. No one lingered outside. Fear had settled into the building itself. I watched from a cafe across the street. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted to see what happened when no one was left to clean up their mistakes. At 9:07 a.m., Eleanor arrived. She wasn't escorted inside. Security stopped her at the entrance. She argued, pointed toward the executive elevators. Her access card flashed red. Denied. She slammed it against the scanner again. Red. Again. Red. The same guards who once obeyed every order from her now stood expressionless. One finally gestured toward the visitor desk. She stared at him in disbelief. For the first time in her life, she had to sign in as a guest. I looked away, not because I pitied her, because justice often looked quieter than revenge. My phone rang. Grace. I answered. Hello. They're destroying documents. My heartbeat slowed. Who? I don't know. What did you see? She lowered her voice. The legal department requested industrial shredders. How many? 6. 6. Not 1. Not 2. Enough to erase years of paperwork. Grace. Yes. Leave the building. What? Now. They'll think. I don't care what they think. She hesitated. I still have family inside. So do I. Silence. Then she whispered. I understand. The call ended. Olivia arrived 20 minutes later. We received the same report. Can you stop it? Not without a warrant. And by then, the paper will become dust. She looked frustrated for the first time. The law moves slower than panic. I stared at Rowan Tower. There may be another way. She waited. I remembered something. 15 years ago, after a flood damaged the company's records center, I'd ordered every legal archive duplicated and stored off-site. Marcus had mocked the expense. Victor called it paranoia. Eleanor demanded the budget be cut. I ignored them. The backup warehouse, if it still existed. The originals weren't the only evidence. I looked at Olivia. Come with me. The warehouse stood on the edge of the old industrial district. Rust covered the outer gates. Grass pushed through cracked asphalt. It looked abandoned, exactly as I'd intended years ago. Only 3 people had ever known about it. Me, the archive manager, Marcus. The front lock remained untouched. Inside, rows upon rows of climate-controlled storage shelves stretched into darkness. Dust covered everything. No one had visited in years. I released a slow breath. They never found it. Olivia smiled for the first time since we'd met. Looks like your paranoia saved us. We walked deeper inside. Shelf D, 14. Corporate compliance. Project Atlas. The cabinet door opened. Still sealed. Untouched. I reached inside and removed a heavy gray archive box. Original contracts. Approval letters. Bank guarantees. Internal objections. Everything. Every signature. Every warning. Every concealed disagreement. Nothing missing. Nothing altered. Olivia carefully lifted the top file. Then froze. What is it? She silently handed me the document. It wasn't financial. It was a shareholder agreement. Signed 8 years earlier. One signature didn't belong to any Rowan. Or any executive. It belonged to Lucas Harlan. Not as legal advisor. As beneficial owner. 5%. Hidden through layered trusts. My breathing stopped. He hadn't merely advised Project Atlas. He had secretly owned part of it. Every decision. Every payment. Every delay. Every manipulation. He profited from all of it. Olivia slowly closed the file. This. She looked directly at me. Changes the entire investigation. And somewhere across the city, unaware that the forgotten warehouse still existed. The man who had spent years hiding behind the Rowan family had just become the most dangerous person in the case. The warehouse doors had barely finished closing behind us when Olivia's phone rang. She answered with a single word. Grant. The color drained from her face. When, a pause. Seal the building. No one leaves. She ended the call and looked at me. They've arrested Victor Rowan. I frowned. For the murder? No. She held up her phone. He tried to leave the country. That wasn't the reaction of an innocent man, but it also wasn't the reaction of the mastermind. Victor always panicked when pressure mounted. He had never been patient enough to orchestrate something as elaborate as Project Atlas. He's running from something, I said. Olivia nodded. Or someone. 2 hours later, we entered the Financial Crimes Division headquarters through a secure underground entrance. The archive box never left Olivia's sight. 3 investigators photographed every document before opening it. One by one, contracts were scanned. Meeting minutes. Approval records. Handwritten objections. Everything was cataloged. Then an older forensic examiner stopped. Director. Olivia walked over. The examiner pointed to a page buried between financing agreements. It was hidden. The page had been folded inward. Not accidentally. Deliberately. Olivia unfolded it carefully. Silence filled the room. It was a confidential legal opinion. Prepared 9 years ago. Addressed only to Marcus Rowan. The conclusion occupied a single paragraph. Project Atlas contains concealed ownership structures that expose Rowan Group to criminal liability. Proceeding without disclosure constitutes fraud. Marcus had known. Not every detail. But enough. Enough to stop everything. Instead, he had signed. I stared at the familiar signature. The old man had once told me, a leader protects his people. Now I finally understood. He had only meant his blood. Marcus requested a meeting before sunset. Not in Rowan Tower. Not at his mansion. At the old botanical garden where he'd once taught me how to negotiate without raising my voice. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He sat alone beneath a glass pavilion. No assistants. No lawyers. Just an aging man surrounded by dying autumn leaves. You found it. He didn't ask. He knew. The legal opinion. I sat across from him. You buried it. I locked it away. There's a difference? In my mind. He closed his eyes briefly. There was. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. When Lucas brought Atlas to me, his voice carried none of its usual authority. He promised the structure was legal. You believed him? I wanted to. That answer hurt more than a lie. Because it was honest. I had already borrowed too much. He looked toward the trees. The company was close to collapse. You should have told the board. I should have told you. There it was. The first true apology. Not wrapped in excuses. Not followed by a request. Simply spoken. I thought I could fix everything later. I looked at the old man who had built an empire through discipline and fear. For the first time, he looked fragile. Instead, I said quietly, you spent years protecting a mistake. I protected my family. You protected their illusion. His shoulders slumped. I know. A cold wind passed through the pavilion. Marcus reached into his coat and placed a sealed envelope on the table. My resignation. I didn't touch it. I'll announce it tomorrow. You should. I've also signed sworn testimony. That surprised me. Against Lucas. And myself. He met my eyes. I am guilty. The words echoed heavily. Not because of the law. Because they came from a man who had spent his entire life refusing weakness. I don't expect forgiveness. You won't receive it today. He nodded. I know. When I stood to leave, Marcus spoke one last time. Ethan. I paused. You were the best decision I ever made. A bitter smile touched my lips. And the easiest one to sacrifice. He couldn't deny it. The press conference began at exactly 10 o'clock. Every major news network carried it live. Rows of cameras crowded the Financial Crimes Division auditorium. Corporate analysts, government officials, international investors, even employees from Rowan Group watched through internal broadcasts. Olivia stood at the podium. Behind her, a massive screen displayed a single title. Project Atlas Investigation. She spoke calmly. For 11 months, this investigation examined financial misconduct involving Rowan Group and affiliated entities. No sensationalism. Only facts. Evidence appeared one document at a time. Hidden ownership, forged signatures, shell corporations, offshore transfers. Every exhibit dismantled another layer of deception. Then came the turning point. The screen displayed Lucas Harlan's confidential ownership agreement. The room erupted. Reporters shouted over one another. Olivia raised one hand. It has been verified by independent forensic experts. The noise faded. Mr. Lucas Harlan secretly held a concealed financial interest in Project Atlas while serving as external legal advisor. Another document appeared. Bank transfers. Another. Encrypted correspondence. Another. Payments linked to fabricated executive approvals. Then, my forged signatures. Displayed beside verified originals. A handwriting specialist stepped forward. The questioned signatures were produced using layered digital reconstruction and mechanical tracing. Not mine. Never mine. The accusation that had destroyed my reputation collapsed in less than 2 minutes. The room fell silent. For the first time since the investigation began, my name was cleared publicly. Across the city, police vehicles surrounded Lucas Harlan's penthouse. But he wasn't there. His office. Empty. Private jet terminal. Too late. Bank accounts. Frozen. International alerts. Issued. He had vanished. Olivia watched the updates arrive one after another. He planned an exit. I looked at the screen. He also planned for us finding the documents. You think he's still ahead? No. I shook my head. I think desperate people stop thinking clearly. Almost on cue, another investigator hurried into the auditorium. We found him. Olivia turned. Where? He tried crossing the northern border using diplomatic credentials. Alive. Yes. And armed. She closed her folder. It's over. 3 days later, Lucas Harlan entered the federal courthouse in handcuffs. No smile. No expensive confidence. Just exhaustion. He looked toward the gallery. Our eyes met for only a second. Recognition. Calculation. Acceptance. He understood something important. I hadn't defeated him. His own greed had. If he had never forged my name. If he had never tried removing me before the audit. If he had never escalated to violence. His empire of lies might have survived for years. Instead, every desperate decision accelerated his collapse. The judge denied bail. The courtroom emptied slowly. Outside, reporters surrounded me. Mr. Hayes, do you have anything to say after being cleared? Microphones crowded forward. Months ago, I would have defended Rowan Group. Today, I answered differently. The truth doesn't need someone to rescue it forever. I looked toward the courthouse doors. It only needs someone to stop burying it. I walked away before another question could be asked. Behind me, cameras continued flashing. Ahead of me, for the first time in 15 years, no one was waiting for me to solve their crisis. The silence in my apartment no longer felt empty. It felt earned. For years, Every morning had begun with emergency calls before sunrise. Every evening had ended with another crisis demanding my attention. My calendar had never belonged to me. Now, the only sound was the kettle beginning to whistle. I poured tea into a plain ceramic cup and stood by the window. The skyline hadn't changed. Only my place within it had. My phone buzzed. Not with panic. Not with headlines. An unknown number. I answered. Mr. Hayes? Speaking. My name is Rebecca Lynn. I'm the interim chairwoman of Rowan Group. I had expected the call eventually. What do you need? I'd like to meet. I'm not returning. I know. Her answer came so quickly that I paused. This isn't about bringing you back. What is it about? Thousands of employees who had nothing to do with what happened. That was different. Rebecca chose a small neighborhood cafe instead of an executive restaurant. No assistants. No photographers. No expensive speeches. She looked to be in her early 40s, composed without appearing cold. I voted against your dismissal. I know. She blinked. You do? I read board minutes more carefully than most people read newspapers. A faint smile appeared. So you already know why I'm here. I have a guess. She folded her hands. The company won't survive in its current form. I warned Marcus years ago. I've read those warnings. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she surprised me. I don't want you to save Rowan Group. I looked up. I want you to tell me how not to repeat it. That single sentence carried more humility than I'd heard inside Rowan Tower in 15 years. You understand the difference. I do. She slid a folder toward me. Not an employment contract. A restructuring proposal. Independent oversight. Whistleblower protections. Mandatory external audits. Limits on executive authority. Transparent procurement. Most of those ideas had once been dismissed as unnecessary expenses. Now they formed the foundation of the company's survival. I won't lead it, I said. I'm not asking you to. You'll face resistance. I already am. She smiled wearily. But at least now they're arguing in meeting rooms instead of hiding crimes. I couldn't help smiling back. It was the first genuine smile I'd shared in months. When I returned home, another visitor was waiting outside the building. Grace. She held a cardboard box. I found these. Inside were dozens of framed photographs. Company anniversaries. Charity events. Award ceremonies. Project celebrations. In almost every picture, I stood slightly behind the Rowan family. Close enough to work. Far enough not to belong. Grace traced one photograph with her thumb. I never noticed. What? You're carrying everyone else's trophies. I looked. She was right. Marcus accepted awards. Victor shook hands. Eleanor smiled for cameras. I held briefing folders. Coordinated schedules. Managed details outside the frame. Invisible. Necessary. Replaceable. I thought you liked staying out of the spotlight. I didn't mind. But I minded being forgotten. Grace lowered her head. I'm sorry. So am I. She looked surprised. I should have stopped pretending everything was fine. She nodded slowly. Will you ever forgive us? I answered honestly. I don't know. She accepted that answer. Perhaps because it was the only truthful one. Before leaving, she placed the box inside my apartment. These belong to you too. For the first time, someone from the Rowan family had returned something instead of taking it away. That evening, I removed every photograph from its frame. Not because I wanted to erase the past. Because I no longer wanted to preserve it as it had been presented. I kept only one picture. It wasn't from a gala or a board meeting. It showed warehouse employees sharing lunch on overturned shipping crates after we'd finished rebuilding a flooded distribution center. Everyone looked exhausted. Everyone looked happy. No titles. No hierarchy. Just people solving a problem together. That was the memory worth keeping. 6 months passed. The city eventually found newer scandals to discuss. Television panels stopped mentioning my name. The internet moved on. Peace arrived quietly. Not as a dramatic reward. As a habit. One autumn morning, Olivia Grant invited me to speak at a leadership ethics forum attended by university students, young entrepreneurs, and public administrators. I don't give speeches, I told her. You tell stories. That's different. Exactly. The auditorium wasn't grand. No flashing cameras. No billion-dollar executives. Just curious faces. A student stood first during the question session. If you could go back. She hesitated. Would you still help the Rowan family? The room became silent. It was the question everyone secretly wanted answered. I thought carefully before responding. I would help the employees. The student waited. I would never again confuse protecting people with protecting those in power. Pens began moving across notebooks. Another student raised his hand. Weren't you angry? I was. So why didn't you destroy them when you had the chance? I smiled faintly. They were already doing that themselves. The room fell quiet again. Some lessons required no further explanation. After the event, Olivia walked beside me across the campus. You've changed. I've slowed down. No. She shook her head. You stopped carrying responsibility that never belonged to you. That sentence stayed with me long after she left. A week later, I opened the doors of a modest consulting office. Not a corporate empire. Not another executive suite. Just a place where small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and family-owned companies could seek honest advice before problems became disasters. The sign outside carried only 2 words. Hayes Advisory. No golden logo. No towering headquarters. No portraits of founders. Inside, the first clients were a husband and wife struggling to keep their manufacturing business alive. They argued constantly, interrupted each other, feared bankruptcy. I listened, really listened. Before discussing numbers, I asked, what kind of company do you want your children to inherit? They looked at each other. Then, for the first time since entering, they stopped arguing. Sometimes the right question mattered more than the perfect strategy. Months later, Daniel joined the firm part-time after officially retiring again. This retirement thing doesn't suit me, he complained while organizing files. It didn't the first time either. He laughed. So we're helping companies stay honest now. We're helping them stay human. He nodded. I like that better. One winter afternoon, a package arrived without a return address. Inside was the old silver company pin Marcus Rowan had once placed on my lapel. Alongside it lay a handwritten note. I finally understand the difference between loyalty and ownership. Thank you for teaching me too late. Marcus Rowan. No request. No excuse. No expectation of a reply. I placed the pin inside a drawer. Not on my jacket. Some chapters deserved remembrance, not repetition. Outside my office window, fresh snow began covering the streets. For the first time in many years, I watched it fall without checking my phone, without waiting for another emergency, without wondering who would call next. The silence remained. But now, it felt like home. The invitation arrived on a quiet Monday morning. Heavy cream-colored paper. No company logo. No elaborate design. Just a single sentence. Your presence is requested at the final creditors' hearing of Rowan Group. I stared at the envelope for several seconds before placing it on my desk. Daniel looked up from the financial reports spread across the conference table. You're thinking about not going. I am. You probably should. I also probably shouldn't. He smiled knowingly. Closure usually feels inconvenient. I sighed. I spent 15 years believing my story ended inside that company. And now I want to make sure it really ends. The courthouse looked different from the last time I had stood there. Months earlier, it had been surrounded by cameras hunting scandal. Today, there were fewer reporters. The excitement had faded. Only consequences remained. Inside the hearing room, rows once reserved for influential executives were half empty. Several former board members had already accepted plea agreements. Others faced civil lawsuits. Investors sought compensation. Employees waited anxiously to learn whether the reorganized company would survive. The empire hadn't disappeared. It had become accountable. Rebecca Lynn stood near the front, reviewing documents with the restructuring team. When she noticed me, she walked over. I'm glad you came. I almost didn't. She nodded. I understand. There was no awkwardness between us. Only mutual respect. How bad is it? I asked. Worse than the headlines. She glanced around the room. But not hopeless. You've kept the employees. We sold luxury assets instead. I couldn't hide a faint smile. Marcus would have hated that. He did. Her expression softened. But he signed every approval himself. That surprised me. He never objected? He said something before signing. What? Rebecca looked directly at me. An empire isn't worth saving if honesty can't live inside it. For a long moment, I said nothing. Perhaps people really could change. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to stop creating new victims. The courtroom doors opened. Marcus Rowan entered slowly. He no longer wore tailored Italian suits. No entourage followed him. No executives stood to greet him. He looked like an elderly man carrying the weight of decisions no one else could lift. As he passed me, he stopped. Ethan. Marcus. I won't keep you. He smiled sadly. I only wanted to say, I read your interview. I've given several. The one where you said protecting people isn't the same as protecting power. I remembered. It was true. It was. He hesitated. I wish I'd learned that 30 years earlier. His voice wasn't asking for sympathy, only acknowledging regret. I nodded once. So do I. Neither of us said anything more. We walked into the courtroom separately, for the first time, not as chairman and subordinate, simply as two men living with the consequences of their choices. The hearing lasted nearly 4 hours. Financial experts testified. Independent auditors confirmed that Rebecca's restructuring had stabilized operations. Several criminal cases had already concluded. Others remained ongoing. Then Lucas Harlan was brought into the courtroom under heavy security. He looked thinner. His expensive confidence had vanished. The judge addressed him calmly. Do you wish to make a statement before sentencing? Lucas stood. For a brief moment, I wondered whether he would finally accept responsibility. Instead, he turned toward me. If he had stayed loyal. The courtroom became silent. None of this would have happened. Old habits. Even now. Still searching for someone else to blame. The judge interrupted. Mr. Harlan. Lucas ignored him. He abandoned the company. He pointed at me. He let everything collapse. I remained seated. Didn't answer. Didn't defend myself. Because I no longer needed to. The prosecutor quietly stood. Your Honor. She held up a thick folder. The evidence demonstrates that Mr. Hayes warned the defendants repeatedly over several years. She placed handwritten objections onto the evidence screen. My reports. My recommendations. My warnings. Ignored. Buried. Mocked. The courtroom watched in silence. The prosecutor continued. The collapse began long before Mr. Hayes walked away. Lucas slowly lowered his head. For the first time since his arrest, he had no argument left. Snow covered the cemetery in a thin white blanket. Not many people attended. Just a handful of family members. A few former employees. Rebecca, Grace, Daniel, and me. Marcus Rowan had passed away quietly 3 months after the final hearing. A heart attack. The doctors called it sudden. Those who had known him understood it had been arriving for years. The priest finished speaking. People began leaving in silence. Grace remained beside the grave. He never stopped regretting it. I know. He talked about you often. I looked at the fresh headstone. He didn't need to. He wanted to. She brushed a snowflake from the flowers. He said losing your trust was the moment he truly lost the company. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, Grace smiled through tears. I'm leaving the board. What will you do? I accepted a position teaching business ethics. I couldn't help laughing softly. The Rowans teaching ethics? I know. She laughed too. The irony isn't lost on me. It suits you. She nodded gratefully. Thank you. For what? For showing me that walking away isn't always giving up. She hugged me briefly before following the others. I remained alone. The winter wind moved gently through the trees. I placed the old silver company pin on Marcus's grave. Not as forgiveness. Not as punishment. As an ending. You should have trusted the truth sooner, I said quietly. The wind carried the words away. Spring arrived. Hayes' advisory expanded into a second office. Daniel finally admitted he enjoyed mentoring younger accountants more than retirement. Rebecca occasionally called, not for rescue, but for independent advice. Grace sent postcards from universities where she lectured. Olivia earned a national commendation for exposing one of the country's largest financial fraud cases. Life continued. Not perfectly. Honestly. One afternoon, a young entrepreneur visited my office. He looked exhausted. My partners expect me to fix every mistake. I smiled. I've heard that story before. What should I do? I stood and walked toward the window overlooking the busy street below. People hurried to work. Parents held children's hands. Couriers delivered packages. Construction workers raised new buildings where old ones had been demolished. Cities rebuilt themselves every day. So did people. I turned back to him. Help those willing to be honest. He listened carefully. And those who aren't. I remembered the boardroom. The accusations. The forged signatures. The silence that followed my decision to stop saving people determined to destroy themselves. Then I answered. Let consequences do the work you never should have been carrying. The young man nodded slowly. For the first time since entering my office. He looked lighter. After he left, I locked the office for the evening. The sunset painted the skyline in gold. Once, I had believed greatness meant holding an empire together at any cost. Now I understood something far simpler. Peace wasn't found by winning every battle. It was found by refusing to fight the ones built on lies. I walked home without checking my phone, without waiting for another emergency, without fearing another betrayal. Behind me, the city kept moving. Ahead of me, my own life finally did too.